Hi fellas, just wanted to make another video. This time it is on something completely new. It is on the issue of professional sports today, and this is a topic that everyone can get involved with, whether you're a sort of racially minded person or not. You could be black, whatever, and you'll understand where I'm coming from because you guys don't bullshit when you know what's what. And for all you yes men at the FIA or the RFU, you know who you are. You're a bunch of pathetic pricks. Now let's get into the meat and potatoes. Every sort of socialist or communist regime always has to have its secret police and enforcers. And in Soviet Russia, they were censored everything and anything. You had the Cheka, and in China under Chairman Mao, there were these people who would come to the house of every Chinese man and make sure he had a Chairman Mao poster on his wall, etc., etc. And I think these sort of self-righteous socialistic ways of thinking are kind of really interfering with the entertainment value of professional sports. I believe we can see from the professional sports that although it's one of our kind of guilty pleasures, it's probably not what we should be doing as nationalists watching sport, but let's face it, everyone has to relax sometimes, and we also have hobbies. Some of these hobbies might include watching football or whatever, right? It is really irritating me how all the sports nowadays are becoming so over-regulated. Okay, it is what they call health and safety. Now, the reason they are doing this is because they want to create an enforced equality by making men more feminine and women more masculine. Most professional sport that draws the crowds is played using men, whether that be boxing, rugby. I'm not going to go into American sports because it's not my thing, but boxing, rugby, or motorsport, or many other kinds even. Now, what I have noticed in recent years, they have sneaked in a lot of new rules and regulations that not only make these sports a lot more dull, but they also kind of enforce a certain result on the sport. These regulations, they interfere with things. Let me give you an example. Boxing now. The doctor in boxing who is consulted at the end of every round. Now, where he used to be, he would give him the benefit of the doubt. Now, if he sees a little bump or a little lump, he's thinking, shall I stop the fight? Shall I not? And he has the power to do that. In the old days, if a doctor had come in with a guy with a scrape on his face, his team would have said, fuck off, and quite rightly too, because they're there for a fight, they're there for a scrap. They don't want to be fucking interrupted when he's got a little scrape on his head. I mean, come on. It's so-called man sport. And I don't care if that's old-fashioned, because that's how I think and how I talk. I'm not going to change for no one. Now, the other thing is the early stoppages. So many fights now, you don't get to see them to their conclusion. A guy gains the upper hand, one fighter gains the upper hand, and he's winning, and he's clubbing the other guy still has his hands up, he's still on his feet, he is struggling, and a knockout is probably going to happen. We can't be certain. And the ref jumps in. Why? Boxing is a tough sport. That's the nature of the game, and that's why people watch it. For knockouts. Alright, it might not be good for the boxer's brain, but that's a risk they've chosen to take. As you can see in most of these cases, when the ref flies in, the boxer who was losing and getting peppered with shots He's saying, what the fuck are you doing? Why you jumped in? I was still on my feet. And he's right. Listen, at that level, if a lad hasn't gone down, don't fucking end the fight. And of course we can see from old fights that it doesn't matter how hard the guy's struggling and he's being pummeled, he can still come back. Look at the Muhammad Ali rope-a-dope. Foreman had him up against the ropes. He was slamming Ali. But Ali, as a professional and a lad who was used to being hit, he bided his time and let Foreman punch himself out. It's one of the greatest fights in history. It would never have happened with today's health and safety bollocks. Let me tell you, that guy, that ref would have jumped in to save Ali. Now, that is boxing. Let me give you some more examples. Okay, rugby. Now, rugby is a tough sport. Now, I am an Englishman and I've played rugby. It is a tough sport. I've also boxed. I would say rugby could be even more painful than boxing in many ways, because you're being hit with these big fat blokes with big pointy heads and pointy elbows. It fucking hurts, let me tell you. Now, rugby is a tough, rough warrior sport. Those blokes are warriors. They're being battered on the field, and that's part of the enjoyment, is that wham, smash, big tackles and things. Everyone loves that. Now look at what these social engineers are doing. And let me reiterate, none of these people have been hired because they love the sport. On the contrary, they're there with their po-faced government agenda to push Marxism where it's not wanted. And I'm sure, although the pundits cannot say much because they will be briefed not to say protest, I am sure most of the people who love these sports will be saying, what the fuck are you doing, you fucking spanners? And they would be exactly right, because those spanners are fucking ruining everything. Now let me tell you, in rugby, head injury assessments, that is a new thing. That's only been going maybe 3-4 years. Every time a player bangs his head, I don't think, usually it's not even when he's been concussed. Just bangs his head injury assessment, and then they go off. The doctor decides if he can carry on, and oftentimes the doctor says, no, you can't carry on, you got some kind of injury, you could die. Yeah, okay, there's a chance of it, but let's face it, folks, in rugby matches, the millions of rugby that's been played in this century and the last, how many people have died from banging their heads? Not many, let's face it. Also, rugby again. Scrums. Every time there is a scrum, they used to crouch, bind, engage. Yeah? And the engage would be slammed together. Now, they just crouch, bind, and they go together slowly, and then when the ref blows, they start pushing. Now, why have they stopped allowing them to slam together? That again was exciting. These big burly blokes, these big props, and they were slamming in together, and no, they get shoulder injuries and what bollocks. If a prop who's had pressure on his muscle, he may get an injury later on that will slow him down or whatever. But again, they are rugby players. They are tough. They know that they can get injuries. They're not sitting there thinking, oh God, what a load of bollocks. And I'm not quite finished with rugby. There is another thing. That was it. High tackles. Now, I watched a match where a lad got sent off in the first few minutes through a high tackle, and it was the most innocuous little challenge that I'd ever seen.